All right, welcome back to The Explainer. We've been deep in Marx's analysis, figuring out how surplus value gets produced. Now we're at chapter 18, which is a real turning point. Marx shifts gears from the process of production to its quantification. He asks a really crucial question. How do we come up with a precise, mathematical way to express the degree of exploitation? And that brings us right to his concept of the rate of surplus value. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with this whole problem of measurement. Then we'll walk through the 3 different formulas that Marx lays out. First, we'll see it from the capitalist's point of view. Then we'll look at it through the lens of the actual worker's day. And finally, we'll get to what Marx sees as the core social relationship. We'll see how these all point to the same reality, and then we'll set the stage for our next explainer, the form of wages. So Marx kicks things off with what sounds like a purely scientific task, right? He wants to find an exact expression for the degree of exploitation of labor power by capital. But this isn't just some math problem for him. The way this formula is constructed, as we're about to see, actually defines the very nature of this whole economic relationship. Marx's big idea is to use a ratio, what he calls the rate of surplus value. But here's the really critical part. He argues you can express this ratio in a few different ways. And this isn't just an academic exercise. The formula you choose completely changes how you see the economic reality underneath. Each one is like a different lens. And as we go, we'll move from what looks like a dry, objective calculation toward what Marx believes is the raw social truth of the matter. Okay, so Marx starts with the formula as it appears from the capitalist's perspective. It's a calculation of value, all expressed in dollars and cents or pounds and shillings in his day. To really get this, let's just do a super quick refresh on 2 key terms we've already covered: surplus value and variable capital. First, we have surplus value, which we call S. This is simply the amount of value the worker produces over and above the value of their own labor power. Now, from the capitalist's point of view, this surplus they get is the big pot of money from which profit, interest, and rent are all paid out. And second, there's variable capital, or V. This is basically the total amount the capitalist spends on wages. Now, why does Marx call it variable? Because unlike constant capital, the machines, the raw materials, whose value just gets transferred over, labor power is the one special commodity that actually creates new value. It's the living, breathing source of capital's growth. So putting those 2 together gives us Marx's first formula. The rate of surplus value is S divided by V. It's a ratio of 2 amounts of value. What it's really measuring is the self-expansion of capital. For the capitalist, it answers a very straightforward question. For every dollar I put into wages, how much surplus value am I getting back? But for Marx, this monetary formula, S divided by V, well, it kind of papers over the human reality of what's happening. So his next move is brilliant. He translates this ratio of values into a ratio of times. He reframes the entire thing within the tangible, lived experience of the worker, the working day itself. Marx argues that the working day, even though it feels like one continuous block of time, is actually split right down the middle. From a value perspective, your day is made up of 2 totally distinct chunks of time. The first part of that day is what he calls necessary labor. This is the block of time where the worker is basically producing the value that's equal to their own wages. Think of it as the time you're working for yourself to cover your own costs. And the second part, that's surplus labor. This is all the time you work after that necessary labor time is done. During this period, you're creating that surplus value, the stuff that the capitalist then gets to keep. And this gives us our second formula for the rate of surplus value, the ratio of surplus labor to necessary labor. All of a sudden, that abstract money ratio, S to V, is now expressed as something concrete and temporal. It's directly measuring how the worker's own day is divided between working for themselves and working for the capitalist. But even this language of time, surplus and necessary, it's still a bit technical. So for his final move, Marx strips away all the jargon to reveal what he thinks is the raw social truth of the whole exchange. This quote right here, it just perfectly sums up Marx's entire project. He wants to demystify everything, to pull back the curtain on the magic of the economy. And this final formula is him doing exactly that. It's the climax of his argument in this chapter. So to do this, he performs one last, really powerful substitution. That necessary labor, the time you spend just to reproduce the value of your own wages, he says, let's just call that what it is, paid labor. And if we do that, well, it logically follows that surplus labor, the time you work for the capitalist, has to be, well, unpaid labor. And there you have it, the third and final formula in its starkest possible form. The rate of surplus value is the ratio of unpaid labor to paid labor. For Marx, this is it. This is the essential social relationship with all the economic mystification stripped away. It's not about value or time anymore. It's about what's paid for and what's not. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand this next point. For Marx, these three formulas are all mathematically identical. If the rate of S over V is, say, 100%, that means, by definition, that surplus labor equals necessary labor, which also means that unpaid labor equals paid labor. They aren't describing different realities. They're just different expressions, different ideological lenses, you could say, for looking at the exact same underlying relationship. This table really pulls our whole journey together. Formula I, surplus over V, that's the capitalist perspective on things. Formula 2, surplus labor over necessary labor, translates that into the worker's lived experience of time. And Formula 3, unpaid over paid labor, well, that reveals what Marx sees as the core social truth. Three different lenses, but they're all focused on the exact same reality. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that the movement from that first formula to the third one is a deliberate process. Marx is trying to demystify things. He's arguing that the way we usually talk about economics, with formulas like S over V, actually hides the nature of the relationship. By translating it first into time and then into the language of payment, he's trying to reveal what he believes is the unvarnished truth at the heart of the wage system, the appropriation of unpaid labor. And this, of course, brings us to a huge, glaring contradiction that Marx now absolutely has to deal with. Because if his final formula is correct, it raises a really obvious and important question about how we all experience work. Think about it. If a part of our labor is really unpaid, then why, when you get a paycheck for an 8-hour day or a 40-hour week, does it feel like you were paid for the whole time? How is that unpaid part hidden so well? This is the final and maybe the most important mystification that Marx is going to tackle in Part 6. So join us next time as we dive into Chapter 19, the transformation of the value and price of labor power into wages.